The Red Scare of the mid-20th century was one of the most paranoid and reactionary periods in American history. Fueled by the fear of communist infiltration, the United States embarked on a crusade to root out suspected radicals, often with little or no evidence. While some concerns about Soviet espionage were legitimate, the hysteria led to absurd and downright ridiculous accusations that defied logic. From Hollywood blacklists to the denunciation of innocent citizens, the Red Scare produced stories that, in retrospect, seem more like the plots of satire than reality, even as parallels can certainly be drawn to today's political and social climate. Let's begin with one of the most infamous examples of Red Scare hysteria, the case of the Hollywood 10. A group of screenwriters and directors were subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, in 1947 and refused to answer questions about their alleged communist affiliations. This refusal led to their imprisonment and blacklisting, effectively ruining their careers. However, the absurdity reached new heights when even animated characters were scrutinized for subversive messages. Rumors spread that Bugs Bunny and other cartoon figures might be spreading communist ideology through subtle messaging. The idea that a wisecracking rabbit was an agent of Marxist propaganda illustrates just how unhinged the fears had become. Another example was the case of Pete Seeger, the folk singer who was blacklisted and brought before HUAC for his left-leaning political views. Seeger was asked whether he had ever performed for communists, to which he wittily replied, "I have sung for Americans of every political persuasion." With this evasive but humorous response, he was ultimately held in contempt of Congress. Perhaps one of the most laughable instances of Red Scare insanity was the 1950s claim that the fluoridation of water was a communist plot to weaken the minds of American citizens. Conspiracy theorists suggested that by adding fluoride to public drinking water, the government was allowing communist agents to control the population through mass poisoning. This theory was so pervasive that it even found its way into popular culture, most notably in Stanley Kubrick's satirical film Dr. Strangelove, where a deranged general rants about communists contaminating Americans' precious bodily fluids. Many false and misleading claims about the effects of fluoridated drinking water persist to this day. Another case that exemplifies the ridiculous nature of the Red Scare involved a small-town librarian, Ruth Brown, in Oklahoma. Brown was accused of communist sympathies simply for stocking books that were considered too liberal. She was ultimately dismissed from her job, illustrating how the anti-communist crusade extended beyond politics and into the realm of public libraries. The mere act of providing access to differing viewpoints was enough to get someone labeled a subversive. Again, an attitude that remains pervasive in American culture and politics today. The perceived enemies change, but the moral panic remains the same. Of course, no discussion of Red Scare would be complete without mentioning Senator Joseph McCarthy, who made a career out of making baseless accusations. One of his most outlandish claims was that he had a list of over 200 communists working in the State Department, a number that changed every time he mentioned it. His theatrics reached such absurd levels that journalist Edward R. Murrow took him down in a famous television broadcast. Murrow, in his 1954 See It Now program, meticulously dissected McCarthy's tactics, using McCarthy's own words against him. He showcased footage of the senator's aggressive and often unfounded accusations, exposing his bullying and fear-mongering tactics. Murrow closed his broadcast with the now famous words, "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty," urging Americans to recognize the dangers of McCarthyism. The broadcast is widely credited with turning public opinion against McCarthy and hastening his political downfall. The Red Scare was a dark chapter in American history, but it was also riddled with moments of sheer absurdity. The idea that communist infiltration could be found in cartoons, folk music, drinking water, and libraries, all with no real substantial evidence, shows how irrational fear can warp logic. In hindsight, these stories serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of mass hysteria and the consequences of letting paranoia override reason. As history has shown, when fear replaces critical thinking, the results can be not only destructive, but also deeply ridiculous. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more terrestrial extras.